Since we just turned on the recording, welcome to the 10th annual meeting of Climate First. I'm Ted Conwell, Director of Climate First, and I want to introduce other board members. I'm a board member. I'm the president of the board, but we have 3 other board members at the present time. And Sasan Degan has been here for many years, since 2016, and he's a dynamo in terms of climate issues. He's been working on issues for Climate First and other organizations for years. Despite having a growing family, he somehow finds the time to work on climate issues and be a member of our board for many years. And he also knows a ton about nonprofits, because I think he still works, or not works, but volunteers for a nonprofit organization that helps nonprofits. So we all really appreciate the work that Sasan does for Climate First. Second, our second board member is Fred Krimgold. Fred, are you here today?
I don't think he's here yet.
Okay, I'm just checking I haven't got a text from him. Okay.
Unless he's on the phone. Somebody's on a telephone.
Okay. Fred has been with us since 2020. He and I work together on numerous issues, currently talking with executives at Bank of America and hopefully in the future other banks, to try to get them to do right by the climate. And Fred has lived all over the world, I think in Sweden and elsewhere, and worked for the World Bank. So he's a real dynamo in terms of international things, and highly educated, and really does great work for us. And then finally, we have a board member, Eugene Pasquale, who joined us a couple years ago, 2021. And you wouldn't believe this, Eugene ran for Congress a year and a half, maybe it's 2 years now, unsuccessfully, but he's now looking at a run for state attorney general of Pennsylvania, where he and his young family live. He lives in York County, Pennsylvania, and it's really great to have somebody on the board who really knows politics well. And then previous to his current position, he's a law professor at Widener University, which is in Chester, Pennsylvania. Previous to doing that and running for Congress, he actually worked for the state of Pennsylvania as Auditor General, which I believe is the same as a treasurer of the state. And so he knows a lot about what climate change is doing to state finances. And if we can help him get that word out, and we'd really like to interview him and pass that around the country to other organizations and people, and that might help convince people in a certain party, which I won't name now, that climate change is a serious issue and we need to deal with it. I just got a text. Let's see. Excuse me. Okay.
No.
Yeah, I think we can. Judy, how far are we behind?
We're not very, I don't think we should skip the video because it's very good.
Yeah.
Let's go there.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. Well, now we're going to see a 6.5 minute clip of a video where CBS News Money Watch interviews Bill McKibben of Third Act and Valerie Rockefeller, hear that name, Rockefeller, of the organization called Bank Forward that does good work on the climate issue. And the video is about the movement, the push banks to address climate change. So with that, Judy, can you start the video? It's 6.5 minutes, and we're gonna cut it just to skip some stuff at the end that's just not really relevant.
I'm screen sharing, but I don't get any sound. Let's see. Wait.
New statistics show the cost of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions. McKinsey and Company estimates it will cost, get this, $9.2 trillion in annual spending to reach that goal by 2050. Meanwhile, climate activists are encouraging people over 60 to pull their money from banks in the hopes that the institutions will be forced to divest from fossil fuels. Environmentalist Bill McKibben, who is the founder of Third Act, is behind the divestment initiative. Valerie Rockefeller is also assisting in the joint venture with her organization, Bank Forward, and they are both joining us now to talk about this. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
All right. So, Bill, let me start with you. Why is your group, Third Act, specifically pushing for people over 60 to divest their investment from banks that invest in fossil fuels?
Because people over 60 have most of the money. When we look at financial assets in the U.S., baby boomers and silent generation, fairly or not, have ended up with about 70% of them. Young people have been in the lead on the climate fight. Everybody knows Greta Thunberg, but there are thousands and thousands of other young people who are doing an amazing job. But we can't take the biggest crisis the world ever saw and just assign it to 17-year-olds as extra homework. Time for the people with some resources to say, we did not save for our whole lives in order to have the money used to destroy the climate we want to leave to our children and grandchildren.
Okay, Valerie, I don't think there isn't a straight line, I think, for most people between their bank that gave them, a car loan or their mortgage and fossil fuels and divesting from fossil fuels. So can you sort of explain the role that banks play?
Yes, thank you for the question. It's great to be reunited with Bill. We've been working together for over a decade on fossil fuel divestment, which is the first part for the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, which I chair, and some other family members and organizations moved out of fossil fuels, the source of the family wealth. And in our philanthropy and our personal lifestyle decisions, we are climate responsible as much as we can be. There was a huge missing piece, which Bill also brought to our attention in an article he wrote about JP Morgan Chase, which is where our dollars lie is actually undermining all the other work that we're doing. So I, for example, this house I'm in right now, my mortgage is JP Morgan Chase, and they are by far the leading bank in terms of funding dirty energy. And we are not going to be able to achieve the 1.5 degree Paris goal, where 191 countries plus the EU came together and committed in 2015 that we were going to align our development, that nations have committed to have their fossil fuel emissions. Banks need to be part of that. Right now, they're funding the problem, not the solution.
Yeah, I think, Bill, it's important that our viewers and the people who are reading the pieces that you publish understand that when we are talking to Valerie and you guys are working together to do this, we're talking about Valerie Rockefeller of the Rockefellers, right? The descendants of J.D. Rockefeller, and they've been able to, they have firsthand experience in this push to divest money from fossil fuels. So talk about the ambitious goal. The goal is to reach net zero greenhouse emissions by 2050. Where exactly would $9.2 trillion need to be vested to help reach this target?
Well, that's the thing. We need the banks and other sources of finance helping spend, bankroll what we have to do, what the scientists tell us we must do, which is build out renewable energy at a rate we have never seen before. The problem is the banks are doing some of that now, but Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America have also lent more than $1 trillion into the fossil fuel industry since those Paris Climate Accords were signed, even though scientists have told us now that we have to stop as of right now, building more fossil fuel infrastructure. The banks are just professional arsonists at this point, just tossing money at an industry that everybody knows has gone rogue.
Valerie, last year the Government Accountability Office told Congress that people's retirement funds are at risk because of climate change. Can we talk about this risk and whether or not people should be concerned? I think, once again, like I said, for many people, there isn't a straight line between their local bank and fossil fuels. I think for many people, there isn't a straight line between their retirement investment and climate change.
They want the best rate or they want the best returns.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But people are also making huge efforts, and especially young people are well aware of climate dangers because they're the ones who are going to be living with it. I mean, one of the moral quandaries of all of this is those who have done the least to create the climate change are those who are suffering the most. And young people are well aware of this injustice, and with a focus on equity in general, they're looking at where the source of power is. And right now it is with the banks who are taking their money that you're trying to make responsible decisions in every other way, and thinking long term. Your retirement account is a long-term prospect. In fact, the short-term profits that the leading U.S. banks, in particular, we've been focusing on with Bank Forward, are focused on, they're putting us all at long-term risk, not just the short-term pollution and the, just the 65 million climate refugees, everything we've seen. I mean, the pandemic has been horrible with COVID. It is nothing compared to the entirely predictable systemic risk we have of climate change. Yet this short-term thinking is putting our long-term investments at risk because, frankly, science dictates we cannot keep investing in fossil fuels. And so what we need to do is transition that money to clean energy, or we're just going to burn the planet up. We've got to keep focused on the goal of 1.5 degrees maximum climate warming. And the banks have to play a role, not just their marketing departments talking about the few investments that they're making in alternative energies. And they need to talk about phasing out fossil fuels. That's what we're asking them to do. And at this point, First Republic is the only one of the 25 major US banks. They're not fully aligned with the Paris goals, but they have committed to phasing out fossil fuels. Lyndon.
I really feel like this is so fascinating because I think just a couple of years ago, we were talking about what you guys spoke about, how, it's the sort of the younger generations, younger than the millennials, that are spearheading this move towards climate change, right? Yeah. And the boomers who were responsible for like this whole social revolution, right, in the 50s and 60s were not even being talked about. In fact, okay, boomer, there was a lot of finger pointing. And so I find it very, very interesting what you guys are doing to kind of bring back that spirit of revolution, if you will, that really the boomers started, and reminding them of their roots and that they.
I think this is where you wanted to stop.
You bet. All right.
So you want to stop share. There you go.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. I guess I'm supposed to do that. I'm host.
I'm just learning Zoom though, everybody, so you'll have to be patient with me.
All right. Well, next we're going to hear from our keynote speaker, Sarah Lasoff, talk about her work with a nationwide coalition called Stop the Money Pipeline, or STOMP for short. It's a 200+ group coalition nationwide, has a lot of power as a result. And she is chairperson of a campaign that STOMP is running called the Customers for Climate Justice Campaign. And we are involved, Climate First is involved heavily with that campaign, and we really believe in it 110%. So reading Sarah's bio, she is a campaign manager at Stop the Money Pipeline. She has been a dedicated organizer in the progressive movement for the past 9 years. She discovered her passion in high school when she formed a youth climate action group that helped pass citywide climate legislation. Then when she was pursuing an undergraduate degree in urban and environmental policy at Occidental College, she discovered a passion for labor rights and became a leader of the school's Student Labor Alliance, which organized students. Sarah later interned at the Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy, working on labor issues. And she also joined a local Unite Here, Local 11, and ran boycott campaigns against hotel companies. After college, she worked on electoral organizing campaigns at People's Action to elect Joe Biden. And finally, over the last 1.5 years, as I said earlier, she's been working for STOMP, which supports a national coalition of organizations demanding that the finance industry in the US stop funding the destruction of our climate. With that, Sarah, you want to take it off from here?
Yeah, absolutely. And since we are short on time, Ted, do you want to tell me how much time I have? And I can always shorten up some sections.
Yeah, we're about 7. Why don't you just go for 10 minutes? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. Cool. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Ted, for inviting me to speak at this call. I'm really excited to be telling you all what we've been able to grow and build at Stop the Money Pipeline in the last year and a half since I've joined the team. And one of those things, as Ted mentioned, has been the incredible project of Customers for Climate Justice, which we really started from scratch when I joined. It was just an idea on a piece of paper that we built into this entire program. And one of the most consistent leaders and folks that have been involved since the beginning has been Ted. I promise he didn't tell me to say this, but he has just taken this idea and run with it. So I'm super grateful for folks like him that have just been consistently involved and participating and implementing these ideas and who are the direct folks taking action. So, while my job and other folks' jobs at Stop the Money Pipeline is to do this national organizing and make sure all of the pieces are connected, it's really folks on the ground locally who are putting that direct pressure on the banks and who are making a difference. So every time that one person, goes out and takes action, it adds to this collective power that we have on these financial institutions. So yeah, I'm just super grateful for local organizations like this that take the time and the energy and put in the effort to build local infrastructure and grow the movement by getting new folks in their community involved and plugging those folks into action, giving them the support and guidance they need, and sometimes that little, push that they need to take action. So thank you for showing up and being here and doing all the local work that you do. So now I want to talk a little bit about Stop the Money Pipeline and this program that we've built, Customers for Climate Justice. And Customers for Climate Justice started in October 2021 with the goal of organizing retail bank customers of those top 4 banks that Bill McKibben was just talking about: Bank of America, Chase, Citibank, and Wells Fargo. And this has really been the first time that we know of that anyone has organized bank customers in the United States in this way, and specifically bank customers who are advocating for climate justice. And our vision was to have thousands of customers sign these letters to the CEOs of their banks, asking them to stop financing fossil fuels and deforestation. And we achieved that goal and so much more. We blew our original goal out of the water when we had tens of thousands of customers sign on to these letters and join our campaign. And since then, customers have sent emails, made direct phone calls to bank executives, commented on banks' greenwashing posts on LinkedIn, which is actually a really important place for banks to look good for prospective employees. So we've been really thinking about, where can we target them that's really going to impact them. And so on top of those digital actions, we've also been able to support folks in organizing in-person actions, as well as virtual meetings with some pretty high-level bank staff, as Ted also was mentioning. And one of our strategies in this campaign has been not only to organize bank customers, but also simultaneously educate and organize bank staff, because we really believe that we need bank staff on our side in order to win. So when we protest or when we go to a branch manager meeting, we want to make sure that folks know that everyday bank staff are not our enemy. And in fact, it's really important that we educate and organize bank staff to get them on our side in order to win, because we're going to need to create a culture at these banks where folks care about these issues and are talking to each other about it and talking to their supervisors about it, so that there's, simultaneously a culture shift in the bank, because banks really care about the way they are perceived, not only by their customers, but also by their employees. They are constantly trying to hire new talent and remain a competitive employer. So their image is really important to them in that way. And that's another reason why we decided to, support folks in meeting with branch managers. So we've hosted a number of how to meet with your branch manager trainings and have now supported over 100 branch manager meetings around the country, which is just a huge number of folks that we've been able to, grow awareness and educate within these banks. So, and along with that, we've been able to meet with some pretty high level bank executives. We had a group of Wells Fargo customers who were able to meet with the head of sustainability at Wells Fargo and share directly with them, their stories, why they're in this fight, talk about our demands, that customers care and that they want the banks to stop financing the destruction of our planet and our communities. And there was also a group of customers who met with the head of sustainability at Citibank, along with the head of consumer banking and the head of consumer banking, and the head of consumer banking and the head of corporate banking and corporate transitions and sustainability. So yeah, it's been a super lively and engaging program, and we've seen a tremendous amount of impact and advocacy through that. And now we're kind of coming to this moment in our movement where there's a huge number of bank customers who are actually ready to move their money, which is something that we did not expect to see, because it's a really hard ask for folks to pledge to move their money or actually move their money. But there is this greater demand of folks who are ready to move their money. And there's a number of folks figuring out like kind of small in between ways that they can do it. There's always going to be, on top of these folks, there's always going to be customers who are tied to the banks for whatever reason, like you have a mortgage or you have an inherited IRA. So in those cases, folks who are tied with the banks, they should always, there are avenues for them to advocate for climate justice within the bank. That's why we have, our Customers for Climate Justice resources, and we even have some upcoming how to talk to your wealth manager and financial advisor trainings. But on top of that, folks are figuring out, I could just, stop using a credit card with a dirty bank, even if I don't cut it up, or I could move a chunk of my savings or open up a card with a climate and human rights friendly bank, or whatever it is. There's small ways that folks have been kind of moving away from these banks. So now we have an opportunity to make those small actions really big with this collective National Day of Action to Stop Dirty Banks, which is happening on March 21st. And we're trying to make this moment as big and as bold as possible while keeping, the integrity of the mission, which is to shift the demand away from dirty banks and towards banks that don't finance the destruction of our planet and our communities. So we have this opportunity to let the public and the banks know that this is happening and that customers and non-customers care and the pressure is on. So we're asking folks to show up, make this day as big and visible as possible, which means showing up, taking pictures, participating, talking to the press. And we have so many resources for folks who are participating. And I know some folks at Climate First are already thinking about this. So just really excited about that and excited to see these actions come together. You can go onto the Third Act site. It's thirdact.org/national-day-of-action. I can also drop it in the chat once I'm done talking. But there's, you can see on that page, there's a map of actions all over the country. There's over 70 actions and we're still a month out, which is just so incredible. And our partners over the next month are going to be sending, this map out to their list. So we're going to get even more folks to join, host actions in places that there aren't already actions, and plug people into the places where there are. So the last thing, let's see how I'm doing on my time. The last thing that I wanted to talk about after 321, we're heading straight into our shareholder showdown campaign, which we've just finalized the name for. Shareholder Showdown, the most important climate votes you've never heard of, where we're going to be organizing groups to actually push their state's pension fund to support climate and Indigenous rights resolutions. And if you've never heard of shareholder season before, we're going to have a whole FAQ and site section of our website to answer questions. What is this? Why does it matter? What is an annual general meeting? But basically, shareholders of these financial institutions are meeting every year in these annual general meetings and have the opportunity to vote on these resolutions that can influence the direction of the policies and practices of these banks. And one quick caveat about the vote. So it's not like if you get over 50%, then a resolution passes. It's actually like if even 10% of investors vote on a resolution, this can have a huge impact on the bank and their business. So we have an opportunity this year to get over 10% and make this percentage as big as we can, which would be, a super significant victory for us. And there's actually an investor that you all in Maryland have the power to pressure, and that's the Maryland State Retirement System, which has about $70 billion of assets under management. And last year, they actually opposed the 2 climate resolutions that were filed. So we definitely want to call on them, and specifically the Maryland State Treasurer, Derek Davis, to make sure they vote yes on these resolutions. And, this is a part of a national movement of folks. There's folks in California doing this, and Washington State. But just to wrap this up, so a couple things that we're asking folks to join and show up for coming up are the March 21st Day of Action. Right before that, there's going to be a Gulf Solidarity webinar if you're interested in hearing more about the Gulf work that's being done because of the horrific LNG build out that's happening in the Gulf. So please, be on the lookout for that. Happy to send information about that. And then these other campaigns that I talked about. And I just want to finish by saying that we really have the momentum in this movement right now. In December, HSBC, which is the biggest bank in Europe, just announced it won't lend for fossil fuel expansion. So this is possible. These banks actually, it's feasible. They can make these commitments. It's just going to take us all pushing and pressuring them and continuing to take action. So thank you so much for everything that you are already doing in this fight. And it's really just an honor to be in this fight with you all. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Sarah, for your fine talk about the great work you're doing. Really appreciate it. Appreciate that. And working with you has just been one of the, for me anyway, one of the best things I've ever done in the 10 years I've been in the climate business. There just seems to be so much potential in the campaigns that Stop the Money Pipeline is created. Some of them totally new and different than what other organizations have ever done in regarding this issue. So thank you, Sarah. We have some time for questions and Q&A, I should say. Does anybody have any questions, comments, issues they want to ask Sarah about?
I do.
Go ahead, Judy.
Sarah, how many of these customers for climate justice branches, such as our own climate justice, are there in the US?
In terms of like local teams that are
Yes, that work with you.
yeah, we've got about 7 active customer kind of like bank teams. Yeah, we've got some folks in the Bay Area, in Seattle, in Rhode Island, and then you all in Maryland, DC area, New Jersey, and then there's 2 more that I'm not remembering, but yeah, there's about 7. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, I just have a little comment and question, Sarah. I'm happy that you guys are focusing on state pension funds because that's where trillions of dollars are located. And some people who have pensions to their state may not have the ability to rearrange them or take them out or put them into an environmentally green fund or a social justice fund. So you guys will hopefully offset the Ron DeSantis's of the world who want to do just the opposite of what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this is, like you said, it's real people's money that we're talking about. So we're taking this very seriously and want to make sure that it's not being invested in industries that are, going to put this money at risk. So
I had a comment or a question for Ian. Ian is a great volunteer. He's on this call and he's a great volunteer for us. And he has put a ton of time into the campaign, into the Maryland State Treasurer /pension fund, whatever, campaign for Climate First. So Ian, do you want to just give a quick feedback on how the campaign is doing and where we are right now?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Ted, and thanks, Sarah. Thank you, everybody. My name's Ian, and just a new volunteer with Climate First. And Ted hooked me up with Ariel Swernoff, who works with Sarah at Stop the Money Pipeline. And we put together a petition for Maryland to, as Sarah said, pressure the Treasurer, Derek E. Davis. And we tried to get Maryland organizations and individuals to stack the lines of the petition to try to pressure, really put on the pressure to vote in accordance to the ceasing of fossil fuels at the upcoming share meetings. So if you haven't already signed on to that, I'm going to drop the link where you can sign your name on. And yeah.
So you dropped it in the chat, right? Yeah, the Wi-Fi signal is not that strong. You're freezing sometimes, Ian. And we missed some of your words.
Can you hear me? Am I coming through now?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, and if it continues, we'll let you know. And if you turn your camera off and just when you talk, it'll actually sometimes it'll work better. It'll address the issue. I'm no expert at Zoom, but I did learn that. Can you hear me, Ian? Yeah,
yes. Am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize about that. I think it's a hardware issue actually. But so I don't know where I cut off there, but I put together a petition trying to get Maryland organizations to sign on, as well as individuals to put onto Derek E. Davis' desk for the Maryland Treasurer. It's that enough pressures to vote to cease the funding of fossil fuels at the upcoming bank shareholder meetings that they have at the shareholder showdown, as Sarah was talking about. So for those who are not aware, have not signed on to the petition and would like to, I just dropped a link in the chat. And we really encourage anyone involved in the organization first to get the permission of the organization to sign on, but to include them as a a line in the petition sign on. So yeah, thank you very much.
Ian, can I just ask on the
I hope that
petition, it
came
says
through.
deadline is today for sign-ons. Can people have a couple more days to share it with other people?
Yeah, that deadline was kind of self-imposed one. We want enough time for the Maryland State Treasurer to kind of mull over and look at the document. And with the wheels of bureaucracy, we want to make sure that there's well enough time in order to do so. So with Ted's permission, I'll extend the deadline a little bit before we close up.
Of course. Whatever, maybe you should talk to Ariel about that, about pick a date, another deadline.
Yeah, sure thing, will do.
All right, any other questions or comments about Sarah's talk or Ian's little talk?
Are you aware of any similar activities in Virginia?
Yeah.
I myself am not.
Oh, sorry.
Please, Sarah.
Yeah, I would have to look, Fred, because like Ian said, Ariel has been the main campaigner on this issue. And there are a number of like pension fund retirement systems that voted yes on the resolutions that we still want to like shore up and make sure that they vote yes. There's like a number of systems that, you know, voted, or a number of pension funds that voted no. And then there's ones who are like kind of in between, who like maybe voted on one or didn't vote on the other. So I'm happy to look for you, Fred, and see if there's anything going on in Virginia or what's going on in Virginia.
Okay. Also, my understanding is that both New York City and New York State are on the right side of this.
I think so. Yeah. It looks like there's also the New York State Teachers Retirement System actually is, it looks like that they opposed the resolutions. So there are some folks in New York who are organizing around this as well.
And would this be relevant for TIAA?
That is another good question. I think that it is, I think TIAA is like a bigger kind of version of these like smaller, you know, these smaller retirement funds and investors. And I'm sure TIAA probably has, you know, probably invests in some of these banks, if not all of them. So we are pressuring, you know, we're asking these bigger investors like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, and I'm sure folks are also asking TIAA to also vote the right way on these resolutions. But these are like, you know, huge entities that are a little harder to shift than these like more local retirement pension fund systems. But that doesn't mean they're like off the hook. We should still make sure we're putting them, you know, on notice, and that they know they need to be doing the right thing and voting yes on these resolutions as shareholders of these banks. But we're also making sure that we're, you know, when we can with these like smaller kind of pension fund investors, that I mean, smaller is like, they're not smaller, it's like a huge amount of money and it would actually make a significant difference. But we're focusing on efforts on these funds and the pension funds where we can shift them and get them to vote the right way on these resolutions.
Thanks.
Time for one more question or comment for Ian or Sarah. All right, we're going to move on. And I'm going to do a short talk, and I think Sasan wants to say something first.
Hey, Ted, sorry, I thought we were skipping that portion.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, because we are a little bit behind.
Yep.
Okay. So, and Sarah actually covered some of what I'm going to talk about, so I think we'll definitely get some time back. I just wanted to talk about Climate First, what Climate First did last year, and then going forward into the current year, what we're doing. And a good bit of what I'm going to talk about is in our annual report, which I sent out to everybody, or which we sent out to everybody yesterday, and some people today. So please look at the annual report. Gosh, the report really looks great. The print shop really did a great job for us this year, and really impressed with the report. But more importantly, what's inside the report, I think really shows what Climate First is doing. In preface, though, to talking about Climate First, I just wanted to mention generally how the top 4 climate polluting banks in the world that Sarah mentioned earlier, Chase Bank, Citibank, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America, those are the banks that Customers for Climate Justice really focuses on, and obviously Climate First does too, because we're a part of that campaign. But what are those banks doing as far as addressing their greenhouse gas pollution? And I would say generally, there were some positive developments as far as those 4 lenders in 2022. I'll name one, and Sarah named some others earlier. But one, Citibank actually came out with a hard target as to what they're going to do with their greenhouse gas emissions. When I say hard, they said something like, we are going to reduce our emissions in this sector, maybe the energy sector or whatever, but we are going to reduce our emissions this amount percentage-wise starting in this year. And that was a critical development, because the vast majority of the banks, even including Citibank, in most of their, if not all their plans, they don't have hard targets. They have targets like emissions intensity. We are going to reduce our emissions intensity in the energy sector and the blah, blah, blah sector. And I can't even really explain to you what that is. But if you reduce your emissions intensity in various sectors, if not all the sectors that you loan money to, you can still actually increase your overall emissions. Or actually, I misstated that a little bit. If you reduce the emissions intensity in 1 or 2 sectors, but you have 20 sectors, and they're going up in other sectors, you can actually increase your overall emissions when you add them all together. So just by saying we're going to reduce our emissions intensity, it's really an effort at greenwashing. And all the four banks have done that and continue to do it. And it's our job, Climate First, and the whole coalition of climate groups out there that are working on these issues. We got to convince them that no, greenwashing isn't going to save the climate. You've got to set hard targets. And when Citibank did that, we were really happy. And now we always use that as an example to the other banks, the other 3 banks that we're concentrating on. Look, you've got to set hard targets. And then also, all those top 4 climate polluting banks that we mentioned earlier, they all have net zero emissions by 2050 plans, as well as interim 2030 target plans for their greenhouse gas emissions. And that's great as far as it goes. You have short-term targets because if you want to get to someplace by 2050, you can't start at 2048. So they have the interim targets 2030, but both plans are totally full of loopholes that I mentioned earlier and employ weak targets. Again, which really is greenwashing, trying to show the public that you're good on the environment when you're really not. And then also another issue that Sarah talked a little bit about, the International Energy Agency, IEA, came out with a really important report back in May 2021, a special report that basically said for the world to reach net zero emissions by 2050 and thereby limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we are going to have to stop building any new fossil fuel projects, lending, anything connected with fossil fuels that's new. We have to stop that now. And that was back in May 2021. How many of those 4 banks are doing that? In those US banks, those 4 US banks that we continually talk about, none of them have agreed to do that. In fact, Chase Bank has been increasing it pretty much every year, just lending money to new fossil fuel projects, especially with the current situation we have in this country with natural gas and the Ukraine war and all that. That's really complicated things. So anyway, we're really going to push these 4 banks again, like we did this past year. You have to commit to the IEA special report. It's critical. And as Sarah mentioned, HSBC, the largest bank in Europe, 8th largest bank in the world, actually committed to that. And also Lloyd's, the largest domestic bank in Britain, committed to that. Why can't major US banks do that? Well, because they're making a lot of money. They won't admit that. Well, they admit they're making money, but they of course wouldn't admit that that's why they're ignoring the IEA request. So anyway, as far as 2002 and Climate First, what we did that year, we really need to look at measurables in 2022, quote unquote measurables. But I just want to preface what I'm going to say about the measurables in 2022, that in our bank campaign work last year, we really transitioned from doing pretty much all rallies and protests at banks to more engaging with bank employees and higher level executives. And obviously that's what Sarah was promoting, her campaign, and we're heavily involved in that. And that's why we made that big transition. So we visited more and more Bank of America bank branches in the DC area and beyond than we ever have. And we also started visiting with Chase Bank branch managers and their stand-ins when the manager's not available. But instead of holding signs and, previous to going into the bank and chanting, we would just go straight in. And sometimes I would even wear my old suit, from my court days. And I was also a customer of Bank, and still am a customer of Bank of America. So it was so easy to meet with Bank of America branch managers, and they, to a T, would always appreciate, just maybe 80-90% of them would say to me, "Ted, you're doing God's work," or something to that effect. I couldn't believe it when that started happening. And they would say, "I don't know anything about this issue that you talked about until you told me, and I really appreciate what you said and this information that you give me." And I will pass it up the chain like you're asking to my superiors. And thank you so much for your work. And then I would leave. But as far as measurables, quickly, we met with managers at 22 banks at Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase in 2022. We sent letters to the CEO of Bank of America, one with over 10,000 Bank of America customer signatures. And that was the Campaign for Climate Justice letter that Sarah talked about. Being a customer of, I forget now, 22 years of Bank of America, Sarah chose me to be one of the main signatories of that letter, along with another person, another customer. And we talked on the phone last year with one Bank of America executive that does environment, social governance work. We created a DMV Bank of America customer team that Judy talked about earlier, and prepared ourselves, members of the team, to meet with regional managers and local branch bank managers. We also started, last year I should say, we started to create the DMV Chase Bank customer team. And that's going to follow in the footsteps of the Bank of America team. And then finally, last year, we attended 4 traditional protest rallies in Washington, D.C. And we also tabled at 2 festivals during the year in Montgomery County. So moving on to the last thing that I want to talk about in going forward, basically, what are we doing this year? And as an integral member of the Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition, we're just going to continue encouraging those top four climate polluting banks to divest from fossil fuels and fully invest in clean energy. And in light of that IEA report from 2021, we're going to really push those 4 banks. Look, we have to avoid an increase of warming exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we are going to push them to abide by the IEA's quote unquote milestone of no new fossil fuel projects under any circumstances. Strategically, Climate First will continue to work with STOP's Customers for Climate Justice campaign, and we're going to keep on organizing more customer teams, Citi and then Wells Fargo after Chase and Bank of America. And then we're going to work on other campaigns too. And as Ian mentioned, and Sarah mentioned too, the state treasurer's campaign that STOMP has put together. And Ian's, we're coming to the tail end of that, but the meeting, I'm not sure when the meeting is. I think it's towards the end of March or April or something for Bank of America, but I'm not sure about that. But yeah, we're just going to continue working on that campaign, and Ian is the man for us on that. And then finally, I should say, we're going to get involved in other climate events, more protest rallies, and continue with them like we've been doing for the last 10 years, including youth organized events. So at this point, I would just like to close by saying, with the challenging economic and political realities in the United States, climate activists and their supporters have worked often tirelessly to try to move the country quickly towards addressing one of the greatest threats the world has ever known. And that's why we at Climate First, and I'm sure many other groups are saying the same thing, they just remain stubbornly optimistic that nations of the world will keep the rise in global temperatures either near, if not at 1.5 degrees Celsius, a goal that the world's nations agreed to in the Paris Climate Accord in 2015. So with that, I finished my talk, and does anybody have any questions or comments, concerns about what I talked about?
I don't, Ted, but I have a new job for you. I think you should be a training orientation person for all employees of these banks, especially the managers and CEOs.
Wow. Well, I'd really have to put my suit on and probably shave my beard and create new business cards. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
I have a question from a comment that was put into the blog here, the chat, and that was by Fernanda Lugo. What does Fernanda, what do you mean by democratizing money, and how do we do it?
Yeah, happy you asked. So my organization that I work with, Alliance for Just Money, we're trying to, as I said, democratize money. And what that means is that banks aren't only giving away your deposits. Like, if you think about how it works when you're asking for a loan, banks create new money when they give out loans. Like if a fossil fuel company goes and asks for a loan, they don't just take the money from their depositors, because as you see in your own bank account, like those numbers never go down. So what that means, and it's been admitted by a lot of bankers and bank scholars, is that there's actually a process whereby they're creating new money through this accounting system that they do. And that's only been happening since, like, there's a whole history of the legislation, but we could go back to a world where that banks don't have the capacity to create new money. And it would only be in the hands of a democratic government and a democratically managed economy where citizens would have the money power.
So
yeah,
what
I'm kind of
do we do
butchering
about
this
this?
explanation right now, but there's definitely plenty of resources on the website
Okay.
for Alliance for Just Money you can check out. But that's what we're working with, and we're approaching it from a legislative solution. There's a bill it was called the NEED Act, and it was proposed in 2012, and then it's being reshaped and reintroduced. We're looking for a legislative sponsor at the moment. It's quite likely we'll find someone here in Texas where I'm at. And yeah, this bill might actually work so that we can have a democratically managed money supply system, so that banks don't give the first use of new money created to the borrowers, like fossil fuels and pipeline builders, et cetera.
Okay,
That's
thank
the
you.
gist of it. Thank you for asking.
Any other questions, comments for anybody here?
Yeah, Ted, I was also wondering if there is a legislative side of what you guys are working on, or if it's mostly the consumer to bank organization that is the main ask. And if
A
so,
little-
like, why not try to get a regulative legislative action?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yes, there is a little bit, and Fred could talk. Fred Krimgold, the board member I introduced earlier, and he also asked some questions. He does a little bit of that work, but probably 95% of our work involves going after banks. I shouldn't say going after banks, but trying to push banks to do the right thing vis-a-vis the climate issue.
I would also add that we do partner with other organizations like, Chesapeake Climate Action Network and others, when there's a push for a bill, we do partner with them and sign on to their petitions and also, distribute information to our membership.
And on our advocacy, let me just reiterate what Sarah mentioned about the National Day of Action on March 21st, because we need people, we need all of you to come downtown to Franklin Park in Washington, DC. And on the website for Third Act, you can sign up and you can register. And if you want to be in the wheelchair vigil overnight, the 20th, or all during the day of the 21st, you can sign up for 3 hours to sit in a rocking chair in front of the 4 big banks. And there are 2 marches during the day on the 21st. And there is an interfaith service starting out at 9:30 in the morning at Franklin Park. Is an outside circle. And then we're going to have a thoughtful march around 2 blocks. All 4 banks are in 2 blocks. And we're going to march around them, stopping in front of each bank with songs and tearing up credit cards or cutting up credit cards. We have puppets, we have big banners. So please come and join us. We need people. And there's food. It's all very well organized. And so come and join us. And you can get more information either from me or from Ted or on the website for Third Act.
Thank you for that, Sarah. And I just wanted to add that quickly, San Francisco and Washington, D.C. are the main spots for that day of action on March 21st of this year. That, the event that the day of action that Third Act has created. So there's going to be a lot of people in DC.
But we need more. We need more.
Yeah, we always need more. Any other?
I'll just,
go ahead.
I've been part of Third Act DC. They just launched recently, but of course the Virginia and Maryland groups. Anyway, I just got a survey they need help. It's amazing what they have planned. It sounds to me like it's going to take 100 people working full time from now until then to get this all, just getting the 50 wheelchairs, which they're going to paint and getting them moved and so forth. Anyway, it's a great way to get involved on that day.
And beforehand, preparation.
Well, and beforehand, yes. But anyway, I mean, even getting people to hold the banners, which they have many of, huge banners that are already in progress. Anyway, I'm just saying that you can have a lot more fun doing something on the day. And I think if you register with Third Act DC, they will send you this piece that has all the kinds of jobs they need help with. So it's a lot more fun, working at the same time you're there. So I'm putting in a plug for work. Labor.
Yes. I also just dropped in the chat the registration link for the DC action. So please, if you want to register, you could do it right now. It'll take 30 seconds, click the link, put your name and email, and then, they'll be in touch.
Great.
Right. And rocking chairs, Marianne reminded us, we need 50 and we don't have 50 yet. So if you have any old rocking chairs that you don't mind donating and for a good cause, let us know. They're going to paint them all and have them in front of the banks. But, any thrift store rocking chairs or any you have in your attic, give them to us.
We have time for one more question, comment?
Well, I'm just gonna comment, this is Sarah Peters. If anyone is interested in more the legislative side of the climate advocacy work, I would highly recommend looking into your local chapter of the Sierra Club. They're always looking for more volunteers. I'm actually the short, like 3-month Maryland General Assembly is going on right now. So we're doing a lot of work preparing bill testimonies and testifying before the General Assembly. So if you're interested in legislative work, I would highly look into volunteering for the Sierra Club. That's all.
Thank you for that, Sarah.
Of course.
All right, well, we're a little bit over time, 12 minutes. Sorry, folks. So we're just coming to the end of the general meeting portion of the annual meeting. I just want to thank everybody for attending and participating in that portion of the 10th annual meeting. Coming up next will be a board meeting, a regular board meeting, which technically is part of the annual meeting. And it will go to about probably almost 3:30. And you're welcome to stay, of course, or you're welcome to go on and get outside, enjoy the sun, for those of you in the Washington, D.C. area anyway. We really hope that you've learned something about how we and many other groups are using the leverage of bank customers and other strategies to move the top 4 climate polluting banks in the world, to move them to start taking the climate crisis seriously and create legitimate plans to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions immediately. So with that, we hope all you can get involved in the movement if you're not already really involved, with which many of you are. All get involved in the movement to save the climate. So again, thank you so much for coming. You're obviously welcome to stay. We're going to transition over 10 minutes to the board meeting, and well, maybe 5 minutes, since we're definitely behind. So we'll start the board meeting in about 5 minutes.